This screencast is to support this lesson, which is lesson 37 in the book Language to Go Pre-Intermediate by G. Cunningham and S. Mohammed, published by Longman. It will involve a couple of different pages, so you've got the student's book here, and you've got the teacher's book notes, just the one page, quite brief, but some really useful points about the language here, and there's quite a nice way in, or a lead in here as well. You'll also find the grammar reference, which is at the back of the student's book. It's on Teams, so you'll find it there under Files and Class Materials, and just scroll down to find lesson 37 for the grammar reference, which gives you an indication of how much detail or depth you need to go into for a pre-intermediate class. Language to Go also provides some additional controlled practice activities at the back of the book. Again, you'll find all of these on Teams under Class Materials, and you just need to scroll down to Unit 37 to see the activities. I'll be showing you some of those a bit later on in this cast. So we've got a main aim here of the grammar, which is so and such, okay, used for emphasis. We also have a lexis section here on different adjectives, and there is a reading. It's not a very deep and chunky reading, but it provides a nice context for the grammar, and that involves this cartoon here. So let's look at the first section. Well, this is the first part of the material, but I think we need a lead-in before we dive into this vocabulary. The teacher's book has their way in or lead-in, and they talk about trying to elicit from the students what they think would be a good restaurant and a bad restaurant, which I think is quite a nice way of setting up the topic of restaurants, which comes up in the reading. Keep that fairly brief, and that might also elicit a few adjectives, which would be really nice before we come into this section here. So I think some of these adjectives will be known by the students at pre-intermediate level, and some of them might be new. Some of them they might have difficulty with the pronunciation. So we're not looking at completely new words here, and therefore I think it's a good idea to do a kind of test, teach, test format. And that's how it's laid out. This initial activity is to test people's understanding of these adjectives, or to diagnose how much they know about them. So I would show them the adjectives in the box and then show them the example. So something good to eat can be delicious or disgusting. All right, let's look at the next one. Someone who's had enough to eat is, what shall we choose? Yeah, hopefully you'll get full. And then you could say, well, what's the opposite? If you haven't had enough to eat, you are hungry. Okay, good. And then let them choose the other one. So give them a time limit of maybe 3-4 minutes to decide which one is the adjective and which one is the opposite. Then get them to talk together to compare their answers, and this should give you a lot of information while you're listening to this, listening to them talking about their answers. You might hear some pronunciation errors or some errors in the word choice, and then you can target your feedback towards those areas that they've had the most difficulty with. Some of them are definitely going to need drilling, aren't they? I mean, delicious and disgusting are actually pretty tricky, and you've got generous, the j, not the g. Serious, eus, is quite tricky on the end. Attractive, not attractive. So decide which ones you're going to drill. You may also need to check meaning. So particularly with something like funny, it can be very easily confused with fun. So I think it might be a good opportunity to clarify the difference between those two, and say, well, if it's funny, it's ha 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 ha, makes you laugh a lot. If it's fun, you have a good time. All right, so some of it might need more checking. Now here we have some controlled practice, so the final test, if you like, of the test, teach, test format. And we want the students to choose the correct adjective from the alternatives given. With this kind of activity, it's a really good idea to get them to read the whole thing first, so they get a general idea of the text as a whole before they start diving into the choices of the lexis. So I would get this up on the screen and say, okay, who's writing this? Oh, it's Tony. Yeah, who's he writing to? Elisa. Okay, right, he's writing to Elisa about a date that he had with a woman called Miranda. I want you to read the letter and think, was it a good date or a bad date? And then get them to read through quickly. Don't worry about the words that they need to make choices about. And then you can say, well, what do you think? Was it a good date or a bad date? I mean, they may have different ideas because actually it's a little bit ambiguous. But do give them the chance to read through it first and get a general idea before then saying, okay, now try to choose the correct word and do number 1 together as an example. And then let the students have some time to read and think and make their choices. Again, get them talking together after they've finished so that you can listen in and see where the problem areas lie, and then some nice clear feedback nominating people for their answers. All right, so let's move on to dealing with the reading, which acts as a context for the grammar focus to come. So the first task is to read the cartoon. What's the joke? Do you think it's funny? Okay, I like that, but I think this is crying out for being put into order. So you've got the chance here to get them putting these pictures in order. So what I would do was show them the first picture and say this is the beginning of the story. Okay. And then show another slide with all of these other pictures mixed up and the numbers taken out. And then say to them, okay, what do you think? Put them in the correct order. So you will need numbers on the pictures or letters, but you don't want them to be in order, basically. Okay. So, and then let them look, let them decide what the order is by putting down the letters or the numbers in the correct order, and then say, okay, everybody talk together. What do you think the order is? And get them to decide what the order is, and then come in and check that. Okay, so you might have one slide where all the pictures are jumbled up, and then on the next slide they'll all be in the correct order, okay, unless you can find some fancy way of moving them around on the screen. Then I think you can say to them, okay, so what is the joke? Do you think it's funny? And then I would set task 4, okay, just to make sure that they've fully understood the context, just some simple questions where they choose the correct alternative. Okay. Then we want to start moving to look at the target language. Now, the way that the book does that is they get them to listen to it and underline the stressed words. I've tried this a few times myself. It doesn't work brilliantly, and also sharing the audio in the online classes can be pretty tricky. So I would suggest doing something different. What we want to do is focus on so and such. So I would pull out the sentences with so and such from here, like I was so I'm sorry, I was so long. I'm so tired. It was such boring people. Okay, have those on a different slide. You say them and get the students to tell you which words are stressed. And the teacher's book gives you some good advice about which words are stressed. Okay, and then do some drilling of that to get them using those stressed words correctly. Okay. I would prefer it if they were not drilling from the written word. So I think it's a good idea if you turn off your PowerPoint and maybe give them a prompt. So you might say, tired, and they'd have to say, I'm so tired, or so long. I'm sorry, I was so long. Yeah. Boring people, such boring people. Okay. Just so that they're not just reading it off, that they're having to retrieve some of that grammar as well. And then you can ask them, what do you think happens when we use so and such? Do they make things stronger or weaker? And of course they make them stronger. And then I think it's time to turn to look at form, because that's what's a little bit tricky about this. All right, so you've looked at the examples from the text and you've done some drilling for the pronunciation, and you've covered meaning, that these words make them stronger. Okay, so it's time to look at form. here the box just sort of gives it away, just gives it to them really, and I think we could make the students engage with it better if we give them the examples, yep, like this, and then elicit how we make them, okay, that it's so plus the adjective and it's such plus the adjective plus the noun. And it's important to point out also, to elicit hopefully, that when it's a single noun you need to use a or an, and when it's a plural noun you don't use a or an. Okay, so that will be the form that you can elicit from them. Then I think it's a good idea to do a little bit of checking, so perhaps have a slide with a couple of wrong sentences on it, or turn off your PowerPoint and hold up a piece of paper or a mini whiteboard with an incorrect sentence on it and ask them to correct it, just as a way of working out whether they've really got hold of the fact that it's so plus the adjective and such plus the adjective plus the noun. Controlled practice, you've got a couple of choices here. So there's exercise 8 in the book here where they just put in so and such. That will definitely cement their understanding of the form. Or you've got a couple of activities here, okay? This is in the extra controlled practice tasks, which you'll find on Teams. Scroll down to lesson 37 and you will find these activities, okay? I think maybe 3 and 4 look particularly good. I like 4 because it really makes them rewrite the sentence, which adds a bit of variety. So either do the exercise from the book that we just looked at, the students' page, or use these two, 3 and 4. And that will give you sufficient controlled practice. Remember that controlled practice is all about accuracy. So make sure that their answers are correct and that you check the rules in the feedback. So why have you written that sentence? Why is that correct? Why is that wrong? Really get it in their heads before the freer stage. So this activity back on the students' book page, Get Talking, looks pretty good, but I think it needs a little bit of rearrangement in order to work well. I would have a few more items than this. There's just 5 here, so you could add a few more using the adjectives from earlier on. And you could do it as it is, as a list form, or you could make a wheel activity on word wall. That can work quite well. I'll show you an example from a different topic. This is an activity I've made for about phrasal verbs on word wall with the random wheel format. You just type in the phrases or questions or whatever into each thing, and then during the lesson you can spin it and it lands on one. When it lands on one, you can say, right, everybody think about this for 10 seconds and then I'm going to ask someone to speak. So everybody gets 10 seconds to think about what's been landed on. And then you choose someone to speak, and then you say, everybody else listen and do something. So it could be listen and think of a question you want to ask. Listen and write down the adjectives they use. Listen and see, do they use so or such? Okay, so think of an activity for the listeners to do, and then you say, right, for the speaker, you're going to speak for 30 seconds. So time that, get them to speak for 30 seconds, and then say to the other people, okay, so did they use so or such? What did you hear? Good. Okay. And then you spin the wheel again to get a different item on it. And then you say, right, everybody's got 10 seconds to think. And then you choose someone. Okay, Alberto, you're going to talk for 30 seconds. Everybody else, what are you going to do? Listen to see if they use so or such. Good. And then Alberto speaks. Everybody answers, and then you spin the wheel again and give them 10 seconds to think, choose a victim and give them 30 seconds to talk, and then feedback on did they use so and such. While they're speaking, it would be a great idea to jot down some errors that they make, all right? And then you could have a correction slot at the end of the whole activity, where you could either write those errors up on a Word document and share it for everybody to correct together, or you could turn off your PowerPoint, turn off your shared screen, just have them looking at you, and you can say them orally. Someone said, it was so a lovely day. What do you think? Yeah. Or you could hold up a mini whiteboard with the error on it as well. All of those things to provide